Okay, Sunlen, thanks so much. Let's bring in now Democratic Senator Chris Coons. He's a leading Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Allison.
I know you were not part of that committee hearing for Betsy DeVos, but I do want to ask you about how that hearing went. Many of your Senate colleagues asked her a slew of questions. At times it got contentious. Let me just play for you a moment where she responds to how she would feel about more guns in schools. Listen to this.
You can't say definitively today that guns shouldn't be in schools?
Well, I will refer back to Senator Enzi and the school that he was talking about in Wapiti, Wyoming. I think probably there, I would imagine that there's probably a gun in the school to protect from potential grizzlies.
If President Trump moves forward with his plan to ban gun-free school zones, will you support that proposal?
I will support what the president-elect does.
Senator, were you satisfied with her answers?
Not at all, Allison. Look, at best, that was evasive. At worst, that was insulting. The senator from Connecticut was asking about gun-free school zones in part because his state was so rocked, so affected by the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary. And Senator Chris Murphy has been a great advocate for ensuring safety in our public schools by working to reduce the possibilities of gun violence in schools. So he was asking, I think, a relevant and pointed question, which she simply dodged.
A lot of your colleagues felt that they don't support her because she doesn't have any experience personally or professionally with public school education. Her counterpoint is but she has a lot of experience with children and education. Do you think that she will be the next education secretary?
Well, I don't know whether she's going to get confirmed, but I am concerned that her record in advocating for school vouchers and for charter schools doesn't include a record of advocating for accountability and transparency. I'm fine with the idea that we should experiment with charter schools in education as long as they are fully accountable, and I strongly oppose school vouchers. And Ms. DeVos has largely been an activist and an advocate for restructuring the public schools of the state of Michigan with my impression is, from everything I've read, with very negative results for the school children of the state of Michigan.
All right, I want to ask you about some other cabinet picks that are looming. Rex Tillerson, I know that you are still, well, I've heard that you are still on the fence about him. How are you going to vote?
Well, I spent the weekend, Allison, going over the transcript. We had a 9-hour hearing. One of the challenges of these hearings being stacked up was that the Tillerson hearing was the same day as the Sessions hearing, and so I was back and forth between the two. I've got some questions I want to follow up on with Mr. Tillerson, and I'm consulting with colleagues on the committee, both Democrat and Republican. He gave a number of answers in his confirmation hearing that really didn't satisfy me.
Such
about
as?
Lobbying at Exxon, about his view of the role of human rights in advancing American interests, and about his view of climate change. But before the confirmation hearing, we had a very constructive meeting, and I have to ask myself, if not Rex Tillerson, who else might be nominated by President-elect Trump? Like several other nominees by President-elect Trump, Rex Tillerson distanced himself from some of the more alarming things that Donald Trump has said about NATO, about Vladimir Putin and Russia, and about our role in the world, and about the importance of the UN and of the Iran nuclear deal. So he was less concerning to me than Donald Trump is on foreign policy.
Well, speaking of the UN, I know that you also met yesterday with Nikki Haley, Mr. Trump's pick for ambassador to the UN, and she shared with you that her worldview, I think, also diverges somehow from Mr. Trump's. What did she tell you?
That's right. In a series of significant ways, both Governor Nikki Haley, nominated to be the UN ambassador, and Rex Tillerson, nominated to be Secretary of State, have said they value NATO. They have a clear-eyed view of Vladimir Putin as being the aggressor, particularly in Ukraine, that they oppose the idea that we might ever accept the annexation of Crimea, that they don't see the value in a renewed nuclear arms race, and that they do think that we should stay at the table of the climate agreement negotiated in Paris and the Iran nuclear agreement. Those are important steps in the direction of a sort of bipartisan, I think, mature view of world affairs. But it highlights even further how destabilizing and unprecedented the tweets of President-elect Trump Trump over this past weekend have been, where he was picking fights with Angela Merkel, the head of Germany, with NATO, with the CIA, with his own Republican counterparts, and with civil rights legend John Lewis. It's really going to be quite a challenging time ahead, and I see the value of supporting the confirmation of folks who are more seasoned and stable, although they will be serving a president-elect whose foreign policy views are tough to discern at times.
Well, we have a little bit of insight into that. Mr. Trump has just given an interview to the new political news outlet Axios, and he told them why he's giving Putin a fair shake. So let me just read this moment to you. He says, "I give everybody an even start. That, right now, as far as I'm concerned, everybody's got an even start," meaning there's sort of, in his mind, a level playing field between Vladimir Putin and, say, Angela Merkel.
That is ridiculous. That's frankly outrageous to suggest that one of our closest European allies that has stood shoulder to shoulder with us in NATO for 7 decades is to be trusted equally with a head of state of a country that has recently attacked our election with a cyber attack, that has committed human rights violations and atrocities in Aleppo in Syria, and has recently invaded and occupied territory of a neighboring country. To suggest that we should equally trust these two heads of state is, I think, really striking.
Senator Chris Coons, thanks so much. Great to talk to you.